Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Feels Out Loud. It is Sunday, and I hope you have found your morning beverage and a comfortable place to join us today. This is Becky McNattin and Martini from Becoming Together Therapy and Wellness. We are really glad to have you listening as we live and share stories of mental health. Today, we're talking all about disconnection. Last week, we actually highlighted connection a lot, and so felt like it was a natural progression to talk about, well, then what is disconnection? It's winter and it is cold. It gets dark super early, and sometimes it's 5:30 at night and it feels to me like it's 11 p.m. There was this night about 2 months ago where I just needed to be done with the day, and it was only 8:15. That particular night, I felt detached, kind of apathetic, and it seemed like the word to sum it up was disconnect. So do you have this, Tara?
Oh my goodness, all the time. And I think to me, winter and disconnect are kind of just belong together
Yeah.
in that I think of any time of year for the masses, this is when we feel the greatest amount of disconnect,
hmm
particularly after the holidays,
hmm
because we are exhausted and we've done the people thing and the connection piece. And then our bodies and minds and hearts are just tired.
Kind of pull out. Yeah. Well, for those of you listening who have way less interest in making plans, being out, being social, even doing things you enjoy by yourself, Tara and I, are right there with you today.
Mm-hmm.
Disconnection is real, and it is that time of year right now where this darkness, the cold, even that mundane cloudiness that we have a lot can impact our mood, our interactions with others, and then even connection to ourselves. So I really wanted to dive in today to how we experience disconnect, what it feels like, what the function of it is, how we cope with it. And I've been thinking too, I want to ask you about this, Tara, that sometimes when we disconnect, it's because everything around us is so intense,
Yes.
and almost as if we have to literally tune out because the messages from everywhere are frankly too much.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly, there's a ton that we might want to disconnect from right now, and part of the function of disconnection as we talk about this today is that it's not only the effect of something, it is a tool.
Mm-hmm.
We, as you said, kind of post holiday time, we say, I need to disconnect. And what do you think about that?
Well, I think, first of all, it's super important for listeners and for us to understand that when we say disconnect, it doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing, right?
hmm
Later, we'll talk about when it does get into a space where we may need to ask for help or reach out to others. But it's that piece of sometimes that disconnect simply just means turning the noise off,
hmm
literally, metaphorically,
hmm
and just sitting in the quiet.
Yeah. And so you kind of mentioned when it works well, that it causes some stillness. It is like a switch, though. We have this ability to be on in some parts of our lives, and then we can't necessarily decide to be off in others. So it's kind of like an all or nothing.
Mhm.
So when we disconnect to escape or avoid, it can be super helpful. And then maybe we miss out on connection with ourselves, and others that might give us energy.
Right. It's finding that balance.
Mhm. It kind of makes me laugh about, we might notice that bodily sense of disconnect, which we'll get to, that maybe we need to do some practicing of that compassionate curiosity that we talked about last week in recognizing, both how it works for us, how disconnect is gonna be important for us at times in that creating space or distance from something, but then how that can maybe cause some reaction that we might need to be curious about.
Mhm. And it's that piece too of self-regulation, of realizing and like knowing yourself enough to go and listen to it.
Totally.
Oh, I need to disconnect a bit. Okay, self.
Right. Well, right now we're going to take a short commercial break. Join us when we return to identify where you are experiencing disconnect in your life and what you can do about it. Thank you for listening to Feels Out Loud.
You gotta find your people.
Welcome back to Feels Out Loud. I am Tara Martini along with Becky McNattin. So let's jump right back into disconnection and pick up where we left off before the commercial break.
Okay, so I need to tell a story here. I was telling my kids about the topic for this week's show, and I said, we're going to be discussing disconnection. My youngest kiddo says, wait, Mom, so you're talking about electrical circuits on the show? And I laughed initially because for people who don't know me, I know next to nothing about electronics. And of course, because the show is about feels. But from a kid who loves robotics and engineering to me who loves metaphors and examples, I said, wait, has self? Hold up. Maybe we are. Just last week, I went to the toaster and I went to use it and was quite certain it was broken. And that lever on the front of the toaster wouldn't push down. And immediately I jumped to this doesn't work. My family and you, Tara, know me very well. And so first said to me, is it plugged in? And dang, it was not.
Surprise.
Yeah, it was not. And when things aren't plugged in, they don't operate the same way. A toaster, fundamentally, is still a toaster, whether it can actually toast things, but it can do that thing when it plugs in.
Mhm.
And there's utility in not leaving things plugged in all the time. That would be for another show. But we need to notice when things aren't so we can take the action to do it.
Yes.
So now I don't want to get lost in electrical circuits because I wouldn't do it justice anyway. But hear me out on this. Right now, from where you're sitting, and listeners from wherever you are, your comfy spot, wherever you're sitting, I want you to look at something that's plugged in. And I know for sure, regardless of where you are close by a thing that needs electricity to function. So look at it and think about how it takes connection to create energy. What are we plugging into? What does that action do to instigate actual power? What is it we are connecting even? So I don't know much about electrical circuits, but I think it's this beautiful parallel to personal and relational disconnection or connection. When we plug in, we are energized. So I wanted to do a little experiment this week on the show, and I wanted to help us identify ways that we may be disconnected, Dara.
I love this.
So this is not scientific whatsoever. This is Becky created, but I created statements. There's 8 of them. And these are yes or no statements to cause exploration later. So I want to read them. And then we're going to go through them each line and talk about them to notice if we are disconnected. And for those of you who are listening, think about each number. You do not have to remember each statement, but think about what your answer is in yes or no to each of these.
Let's do
Number
this.
1, I do something I love every day. I don't know if that would be yes or no. We'll get to that, Tara. Number 2, I have at least one person who I have scheduled plans with outside of a job. Number 3, I laugh at least twice a day. Number 4, I'm excited about the future of my relationships. 5, I feel a spectrum of feelings and I can share them with others. 6, someone in my life knows how I feel today. Number 7, I show love and gratitude. And number 8, I am kind to me. So those are 8 statements, everybody. You heard them.
Wow.
That you would say yes or no to. And if you answered no to any of the statements, there may be disconnect in your life. And I want to go back and have us talk about each of them together, Tara.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to take them line by line and talk about where you maybe said yes, where you maybe said no, and how do we move from disconnected to connected on each of those.
Let's do that.
So number 1, I do something I love every day. What do you think about it?
Right away, I was like, well, yes, because I go to a job every day that I love so much. And then it got me thinking, in that short time. I wonder how many people go to work every day and they're not doing something they love.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's a lot of people out there who would say, "Oh, yeah."
Yeah, yeah, and maybe outside of even I mean, so cool. We are so grateful we get to do a job we love. I'm thinking in addition to the job part, like hobby or
Mhm.
the how it can be challenging to even identify when we are disconnected to ourselves. Do I love anything?
Well, and not only do I love anything, but oh my gosh, when I think about it, because my third thought was, oh, well, if I think about stuff like reading and cooking, things that bring me joy and that I love, I don't actually do those every day.
Yeah. Yeah, in that prioritization of, oh, I love this thing.
Mhm.
Is that a part of my day?
Right.
Is my day, and as I was referencing in the first segment, how we kind of move into this mundane place that,
Mhm. It's comfortable.
yeah, that maybe isn't bad. It isn't like we don't have hard to feel feels from it, but it's kind of an apathy.
Mhm.
And to me, that is this notation of disconnect, that we're not in our experience. And if we were in our experience, that there might be, and likely would be, even a tiny part of our day that would be something that we love. Or, as you said, i- if you eat food every day and you love cooking, and I know
Mhm.
you do, if you love cooking, how does what you're doing, how can you turn that into something
Right.
that you would love?
Right.
Because how can you move that task of cooking from something that's basic and, like not very pleasant, that feels like it's just
Just a
crossing off a
chore.
list,
Yep.
to, oh, I loved this.
Right. Well, and I think that is a piece of, and I feel like I'm always bringing up like big picture stuff with our society, is that we don't naturally during the weekdays take time to do things we love,
Hmm.
right? It's always, what are you doing Friday? What are you doing this weekend? And then those are the times when you're doing stuff that brings you joy. Part of one summer I spent in France, and my biggest takeaway from the French was that they don't wait for the weekend to do something that brings them joy
Mm,
or that makes them happy or that they love. They do that every single day. It's they work and then their evenings are spent doing that thing they love, doing that thing that brings them joy, doing that thing that brings them peace. And I just soaked in that, absorbed that, and was like, I'm bringing that back. I wish
really good point.
everyone around me could possess that mentality. And it completely changed how I looked at things.
Hmm. Well, yeah, and then part of what you're saying is that doing something we love doesn't need to be extraordinary.
Mm-mm.
That it we maybe have an opportunity for something, and I'm not equating extraordinary with like a hot air balloon. I'm saying
Mhm.
extraordinary like going out to dinner.
Right.
We maybe don't have time
Mhm.
for that or an ability to do that on a daily basis, but we can, from a more simple daily life experience, we can turn our moments into something that we love, or we can
Yes.
integrate those things we love in tiny ways.
And that is the whole piece of, like you said, it doesn't have to be, well, Becky and Tara are saying we need to do something big every single night. No, it doesn't have to be going out to dinner. It could be as simple as like make your meal and sit and like light a candle,
Mhm.
right? Just like create,
Mhm.
this different vibe around the meal. It could be simply 10 minutes before you go to bed, just taking a little bit time to read in your favorite chair or
Yeah.
whatever it is. It's that piece of let's be more intentional with doing the things we love, but also, and this goes back to pretty much like every episode of how can we simplify
Mhm.
rather than add to it.
Well, and remind ourselves we love the thing.
Yes, because
So
we forget.
we forget. And in the monotony of day to day to day to day and moving into one day to the next, to take that moment and when I say kind of connect to it, remind ourselves, oh, I love candles, as you
Yes.
just mentioned.
And speaking of that, what was your first answer when you thought of number one? I do something I love every day.
Well, I get to see people smile every day. I love human smiles.
Mhm.
So I do something I love every day, which kind of leads me to number two
Mhm.
of I have at least one person who I have scheduled plans with outside of a job. Um, this is really important to challenge ourselves to it does not even have to be huge, but to stay we are social beings. And the scheduled plans could look all sorts of ways based on ideally it'd be around also something we love. Maybe that's when we go exercise
Yes.
or maybe we go for a walk or maybe we write alongside someone else or we reach out to have a FaceTime with somebody who we don't live by. We play games. It can be anything, but it makes me think of that is something I love.
And you're building connection by
Mhm.
every single thing that you explained, whether it's FaceTime or playing a game. And it's also that piece of when we look at it from a therapeutic standpoint, we always say, or I always, think anytime we can give ourselves something to look forward to.
Yes, we're putting things out in the future
Mhm.
to have it's kind of what hope is.
Mhm.
We can look forward to those things.
Yes. And one thing that is repeated often is for those of us, if we're on a grief journey or a healing journey or whatever it is, they always say, schedule something to look forward to.
Mhm.
So then it's that hope piece, it's that joy piece. And if you can just, even as simple as, like you said, going for a walk with your neighbor, just think of one person you could have something planned with, simple or as extravagant as you want, outside of a job.
Yeah. Well, it kind of lends itself to that connection often is a reinforcement of energy that comes in the space of humor, which is the third one of I laugh at least twice a day. Years ago, I went and got trained as a laughter yoga specialist.
Of course you did.
Of course,
I
yeah.
love that I'm learning
Oh,
stuff about you.
yeah. And I learned that don't hold me to the specific numbers, but children laugh around 100 times a day,
Mm,
and by adulthood, we laugh less than 10.
mhm,
That was always so striking to me, and I think that disconnection looks often like
mm.
apathy, and when people are living in spaces of apathy, they're not laughing. There's not like fun playfulness that is occurring, and so if you find yourself saying, "I laugh at least twice a day," and the answer is yes, my guess is you're feeling a little connected to even your internal experience, but also you know how to go out and seek joy and fun.
Mhm.
If it's no, laughter is a huge part of energy.
It is something I think is so important, and I think so many people think, "Well, if I'm suffering, I'm not going to laugh."
Mhm.
Both things are possible,
Mhm.
right? We can be having a bad day and still laugh. To your point about children and adults, I am blessed to work at a preschool every Tuesday and working with the kiddos. And if that doesn't, just watching the kids laugh all day long
So
about
contagious.
any random thing,
Yeah.
it makes me laugh just thinking about it
Yes.
because they will say the cutest things, they will do the cutest things, but they choose laughter and they choose joy,
Mhm.
which is something we need to kind of
So
take.
easily.
Yeah.
So easily and very simply that laugh about things that maybe aren't even that funny.
Mhm.
But the response is laughter that we have a lot we could learn from around that and how
Big time.
connected we feel to ourselves when we are laughing. Certainly connected to other people when we're sharing that laughter. Number 4 on this list, I am excited about the future of my relationships. Now, you mentioned a couple minutes ago having something to look forward to. I do think sometimes planning something for relationships allows us to look forward to that relationship.
I agree.
I'm excited about the future of my relationships. Now, as you heard me say it, what popped in your mind first?
Well, as always, so many things. Because that's me. It was interesting because my flow of thought was, my first one was, well, is she meaning like romantic relationship? Well, what if you're someone like me who's not married? Okay, then I went to like my relationship with my kid. And then I was like, well, some people don't have kids. And then I went to,
Mm-hmm.
let's focus on friendships
Mm-hmm.
and think about, and right away I thought of you and one of our coworkers. And I thought, wow, I am excited to see where this takes us in the next 5 to 10 years on working together and the beautiful things we can create.
Mm-hmm.
And it's that piece of, I think many people are like, well, no, I don't, just like I did initially, like, well, if she means this, I don't have that. But it's looking at what relationships do we have,
Yep.
and friendships are some of the greatest
Yeah,
relationships.
even our relationship to ourselves.
Absolutely. We
It,
always have that.
in saying kind of I'm excited about the future of my relationships, it reminds me of one of the things we talked about last week on the show in being curious,
Hmm.
that I think that when we lead with curiosity, it causes wonder. We're like, what's next for this thing? What's next in this dialogue? We spent time talking about curiosity just in
Right.
a conversation and mostly in conflict. But what about in the relationship? And you just mentioned this as you are thinking about your friendships, you're saying, what's this friendship going to look like in a
Mhm.
year? From a space of disconnect. If we're not thinking about the future, we might not be on. We might have
Right.
flipped the switch off, and there might have been purpose to that, of lots of stimuli. Maybe there has been a lot of relational conflict for
Hmm.
someone, but I think if we're in a spot where we're not saying, well, one, there is going to be a future of the relationship,
Hmm.
and then two, I have wonder about that. I'm curious about it, and that kind of innate curiosity makes me excited, and I'm looking forward to it. That feels like the switch is flipped on.
Absolutely. It's on. And like you said, referring to an earlier piece of, then you're leading with excitement and curiosity and not fear. It's interesting because I do want to ask you a question that is not included in our plan. So I'm going to put you on the spot, where how many people in romantic relationships, whether it is a boyfriend, a husband, or a wife, but for you, you've been married what feels like forever, I think,
Hmm.
which is amazing because that's like the minority nowadays. How often do you find yourself just being in the mundane, like, yep, husband, routine,
Often,
schedule?
yeah,
How many times do you pause ever, or if ever, how often are you looking at, I'm excited
yeah. Well,
about what the future holds?
excitement by itself is vulnerable,
Hmm.
and there's fear in being excited about
Hmm.
things. So we hesitate to be excited
Hmm.
about the future of relationships because we wonder what will come
Right.
in that.
What will happen?
And that's part of that leads into number 5, actually, with I feel a spectrum of feelings.
Mhm.
First, I feel the spectrum of feelings
Mhm.
and can share them with others. Part of being excited about relationships is reflecting ourselves to each other. I think if we note in our own bodies as we take the scan of self, if I'm not feeling a spectrum of feels, I might be disconnected. Um,
For sure.
if I'm plugged in and I'm completing the circuit of me,
Mhm.
I will be feeling a spectrum of feels, and it's sort of a challenge of, then what am I doing with them?
Mhm.
Am I sharing them with other people?
And it's that piece of, we need to acknowledge that, right? To sit back and reflect for a moment. Am I feeling that spectrum of feelings? Because I think so often we don't think excitement or curiosity when it comes to any relationship.
No.
Also, looking at, oh my gosh, am I feeling a spectrum of feelings? Not just, am I just getting through the day?
Hmm.
A lot of us do, right?
Yep.
I think about my routine with my daughter during the week, it's the same thing.
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
And it's going back to, do you include something you love? Do you laugh every day? All of those things. How many of us were just getting by?
Yep.
We made it to the end of the day.
Mhm.
Well, that's it. But are we feeling a spectrum of emotions
Yep.
during the day?
And as you mentioned, probably our body is feeling an emotion. We're feeling either we're feeling something, at
Hmm.
least from a few things that we do. We may not be acknowledging it though.
Hmm.
And that's part of that disconnect in the experience might be going on, but I'm not really invested in it. And you talk about this phrase of like literally just getting through the moment. Um that what would look different, and I'm putting you on the spot of what would look different in the moment, in the getting through the day, because hey, like that's we've got to do that.
Hmm.
How would it look to you if you weren't just getting through the day and you said, I can feel a spectrum of feelings and I can share them with others?
Well, and I would think for me, it would turn everything I do that's just routine into something, it sounds dramatic, but something fantastic, right?
Mm,
In that if I was feeling a tinge of sadness, did I pause and like feel it? Or
mhm,
did I just brush it off?
mhm,
Well, I think because of our routines and our schedules, I guarantee if I feel a little bit of excitement, sadness, whatever, I just brush it off. I may acknowledge, but then I brush it off.
mhm,
Well, what would happen? Like you said, I think if I paused and felt those things at the end of the day, I would feel so much more fulfilled.
mhm. One thing that you were just making me think about this, and I do this often with you. I start my day with a dance party in my car, and
Because you're amazing.
I turn on a song to highlight my moment. Sometimes it's sort of to challenge myself to like get into the day, but I try to find when you talk about these. They don't have to be like amazing, but it leads to your life being fantastic. I think that was
Hmm.
your word. It changes me. And in feeling a spectrum of feels, you highlight the when we feel something and noting it. What if we actively sought the feel too? Which is the dance party for me. That
Hmm.
I say I'm putting on uh 90s dance party music and I'm gonna go seek the feel, and then I'm gonna share that with the people around me.
Can
Um
I go off of what you
yeah,
just said?
yeah,
Also, take a second to think about, Becky, the impact you have on others in cars. So you're driving
yeah.
and you're just cutting loose. What you
Totally.
don't realize is you're doing this for a purpose and it changes your trajectory of the day. But I guarantee you are impacting the people around you. There is that moment of joy or that smirk, or the kid looks and goes, "Thank God that's not my mom."
Yes, right.
Or someone's going, "Oh my God, that's so amazing to see."
Mhm.
And also, I wish I could be like that, right? How many people don't have the courage to just step out of their comfort zone
And have a dance party. Yeah.
and be you?
Well, it's and then share it.
Yes, which
Um
is a huge part.
because that is number 6.
Mhm.
Number 6 is someone in my life knows how I feel today.
Mm.
This is big, everybody, because there's one thing to feel the thing. And you and I've talked now a lot about how we need to hold that ourselves. We need to acknowledge it. We need to like scan. We need
Mhm.
to
Sit in it.
well, yeah, we need that is hugely important. Somebody in your life needs to know how you feel today. And that doesn't have to be all day, and it definitely does not have to be some in-depth conversation.
Mm-mm.
But somebody in your life, you are owed having somebody know about you. And that could be something you're wondering about. That could be something that you are, as we talk about, excited about. Could be somebody who you share a thing that's going on in your world with. Obviously, when we talk about number 5, I feel a spectrum of feels. Doesn't mean we even have the ability to share all of them with people
Right.
because that's a lot.
Well, for us, that would be a lot.
Yeah, but someone in my life knows how I feel today. Think of what that does to change our perception on how we matter and how we are connected and belong in the world around us.
And yes, and you are seen and you are heard, that piece. And there are so many people in isolation who might be thinking right now, well, I don't see anyone during the day. I'm by myself. It's that piece of, I also know people that, and nowadays, and it's so huge for kids and adults, of their connection is through video games. Their connection is all of those things. And some of those are the deepest friendships. It's asking those people, how is your day going? Right? How many times have your barista, how are you today? You're like, I'm good. But like, what if you ask them back? And so my point being, it doesn't have to be a relative. It could be anybody.
Could be anybody.
Even a stranger.
Yeah. I think about to what you just said about me and my dance parties in the car. This is a true story that I was in traffic about a year ago. Everybody has stopped, and I'm right next to a person in a car. I turn up my music and I start grooving in the car. This person next to me has no idea what I'm listening to. I wave to them and I pointed like, turn up your radio. And they did.
Stop.
And they turned on something and then started dancing around. And so when you say it does not have to be a family member, does not have to be, that person knows how I felt. They don't have to know this is like tip of the iceberg, even stuff. They don't have to know anything more than that moment. They know how I feel in that moment.
Which is so beautiful and amazing. And you didn't even speak to the person.
Didn't speak
There
to
was
them.
no words.
No, but that person did start smiling. I could tell they started grooving in their car. And I don't know what the song was. I don't know what the song was. But definitely, I also know how they felt. I could see it on their face. And I think about how simple it can be. Now, it's also really hard because this is vulnerability, sharing of ourselves.
Absolutely, yep.
Someone in my life knows how I feel today, but there are scales to that vulnerability. We can share with somebody how we feel or share about what's going on with us, and it doesn't have to be super deep. And that still is connection.
So, but also being truthful in your sharing.
Yeah, good point.
Right? Because how many times, I'm fine, I'm good, I'm good. But if you're honest, you're not, right? Or you're frustrated. It's also okay to say, you know what, I don't feel well. You know what, I'm frustrated. There's beautiful thing in truth and vulnerability.
Yeah, well, that makes me think about, so challenge you right this second. Someone in my life knows how I feel today. What could we do to say more than I'm good? Because good is, in our line of work, good really isn't a feel. Good is a valuation of a feel. Good is actually a judgment of whether the feel is what it is.
Negative, yep.
So good doesn't tell us actually the feel. What would you do in a moment to say to yourself, okay, I'm going to challenge. I'm not going to say I'm good today. I'm going to say what do you fill it in with?
Well, to me, the words that came up were things that I think people are too scared to say. You know what? I'm feeling hurt this morning, or I'm frustrated, or I'm crabby, or I'm tired. I think people are so scared to answer in a word that has a negative connotation.
Well, you've often said to me things like, I'm faking it till I make it today. I know how you're feeling then. So you've said I'm looking for the slice of humor. Or one of the Terra solids is living the dream. Living the dream. And then you're using humor as a strategy to tell me how you feel. But I know how you feel through that. You've reflected it.
Well, and I said yesterday to you, I said, you're like, how are you today? And I'm like, I'm tired of being an adult.
Yeah, right.
I guarantee if you said that to a stranger at the drugstore or grocery store or your barista, they would get it. They know exactly what that feels like.
Yes.
And that is why, and every time we do that, we're building connection. We're seeing each other as human. I mean, it is such a beautiful thing. It's just we have to get rid of that fear base.
And a very honest response, because in that moment you probably really were sick of being an adult.
Sick.
I'm really tired of being an adult.
Yeah.
And people can resonate with that verbiage.
Yeah.
Um,
Yep.
well, number 7. So I show love and gratitude.
Mm.
Huge part of connection, and I think a high note of disconnection. Uh, what it looks like to show love and gratitude also does not have to be something profound,
Mhm.
but the role of reflecting that, verbalizing it, telling people in our world around us, I care about you.
Mm.
It requires a lot. It requires us to be plugged in a way, one, to notice that they're even there. And sometimes I myself, when I'm disconnected, I really don't even notice who's around me. I am just getting through the day.
Right.
But what would you say to I show love and gratitude? What did you think about?
Well, and the thing I thought about was just the fact that I love to show love
Mm,
because I'm such a feeler.
yeah.
So that's easy for me. And then I thought of all the people where it's difficult. Even something we say around the office a lot is, I appreciate you.
Yes, we do.
I love that we do that. But the first time I said it, I was so uncomfortable
Mm,
because I was not used to it, right? I came from a school where it was just you worked a mile a minute and there was little acknowledgement, right?
yeah.
Like you were all just going through the motions.
Yeah.
Um, and I am such a feeler and it made me uncomfortable. And I'm like, I love this because
Mhm.
uncomfortable means growth. So it's that piece of what tiny thing can I do, right, to show love. And that doesn't even to me, it doesn't have to be to a person.
Mm,
It can be to yourself,
yeah.
right? It could be to a pet. It could be to your plants. It could, there are different ways to show love.
Well, it leads back to that first one
Yes.
of you show love to you by doing something you love,
Mhm.
by making a priority in your daily lived experience in small ways to do things you love.
Mhm.
You are
Yes.
actively then saying, self, I'm really grateful for you, or I value you, I appreciate you, and do that thing,
Yes. Yeah. Whatever that thing is,
whatever that thing
like you
is.
said.
Uh-huh.
Yep.
And there are a lot of workspaces and friendship circles that struggle with
Mm.
that verbalizing, as you say, that it almost is strange to be in a spot where people can really openly say, I'm grateful for you, and I'm grateful for you for, and then highlight a specific thing. It's
So foreign.
it's kind of a shift in worldview.
It
Um,
is, but it exists at becoming together. That's the crazy thing because you created this world that does. Imagine if every school, if every business,
mhm.
people lived like that.
People could say, "Good morning. I appreciate you," or
Yeah.
end their emails with "Appreciate all you do," or
Yeah.
"Appreciate all you are."
Yeah. I'm grateful for you.
Well, the last one on this brief quiz is I am kind to me. Um, I purposefully ended with maybe one of the most challenging things because when we talk about judgment and criticism, we are often quite mean to ourselves. And I think it is one of the reasons we disconnect. It becomes the function of disconnect. We tune out of
Mm.
ourselves because the dialogue with us is cruel.
Mhm.
And we will talk about that in future shows, but it's important that we start to bring up what our relationship is with ourselves, and then the function of disconnect might be very real. We have to like pull out of even thinking because our thoughts are not nice.
Well, and you're touching on something that I don't think a lot of people think about. When you suggested this idea of talking about disconnect and feeling disconnected, not once until I looked at this quiz did I think disconnected from self.
Oh, you didn't?
No,
Okay.
I was just thinking the outside world, right?
hmm
Until I literally got to number 8 and was like, "Oh my gosh." And it made me think like, how disconnected or connected am I to myself?
Yeah.
My thoughts, my feelings, whatever those things are.
Yeah, and bringing us back to the first part of the show when we said disconnection is a tool. There are times where what is around us gets so intense, our own dialogue with us can be so intense that we can't handle it anymore.
Right.
We're being mean to us, and what that role of kindness would look like and change our connection and energy with us.
Yes.
Well, so many things to think about here. We are going to head to a commercial break, but Feels Out Loud will be back shortly to talk through your questions about disconnection. Want to know more about how to connect to your moment? Stay tuned, everyone. We'll be right back.
From nobody else, all you got to do now. Nothing to lose. In a world full of strangers, you don't know who to trust. All you see is danger, trying to find what you lost.
We are back again with Feels Out Loud, and this part of the show is where we talk through questions from you, our listeners. If you have a question related to mental wellness, sharing feelings, or topics for each week that you'd like to process through with us, please just email us. Our email address can be found on our show link. We really do want to hear from you and take time every single week to wonder together about the topics on people's minds.
We absolutely do. And this week, we've been talking about disconnection. You have sent in your questions around disconnection. Thank you for doing that. First one is I love this question. What is a way to connect more to my moment? And I think that one of the hugest things that we all fall probably on a daily basis into is living in our phones. When we talk about
Awful.
what is a way to connect more to my moment, well, automatically when we have a device there, then we are in a moment that we aren't actually in, because we're in a different moment. We're in the future, we're in the past. If we're actively walking to somewhere, I see people and I do this too, on their phones. They're not in that moment. They're not walking in that moment and noticing that they are. What would you say about ways to connect more to our moment?
Well, and they're not experiencing the moment, right? They're just getting through it.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that a lot of therapists do, I find myself doing it outside of the therapy office, is, to me, right when I saw this question from the listener, I thought of, we never ground ourselves. We need to ground ourselves more. Well, what does that mean?
Mm-hmm.
We'll talk about it in a therapeutic lens of like someone needing to be grounded. But also, I like to do a little self-check, like ground myself, where if the day is getting away from me and I am finding myself just like going through it and I'm not connecting to the moment,
Mm-hmm.
it's taking a pause and going, okay, self, take some deep breaths. Okay,
Good point.
what are 4 things that I see around me?
Mm-hmm.
What are 3 things that I hear around me? What are 2 things that I can't remember the last 2 sentences.
Oh, kind
I
of like
just
bringing
gave.
in the
Yes.
senses. Yeah.
Yes.
Like, what do you feel?
What do you feel? What
Yeah.
do you hear? What do you see? What do you taste? And that piece of what you're doing is you're reflecting and forcing yourself to be like, oh, I am actually experiencing this moment,
Yes.
right? So what are things I'm seeing? What are things I'm hearing? What are things I'm smelling? All of those things are going to bring you into the moment,
Mm-hmm.
even if it's just for a minute or two.
It's a
But
great idea.
it's going to force you to experience.
Well, and I would end that with, it's right along that, in that sensory experience challenge to all of us. And listener, you're going to challenge me this week. Notice something brand new you've never seen before in the spaces that you always are in.
Ooh.
Try to look for something you haven't seen before. There is always a detail that you have not noticed in the way that that maybe you've seen it even in the past. It can be the same thing, but you see it new. Look for that in the places that are even routine and monotonous for you.
I love that.
It brings in the senses for us. And then the second question we have this week is, what is the best way to start connecting with people around me? I think this is a fantastic question. We highlighted this in the quiz, actually.
Mm-hmm.
My first answer to this person would be gratitude. And we talked about expressing love and gratitude in our last segment. Best way to start connecting with people around you, first tell them you're grateful for them. Practice that and then notice it, with as detailed or specific as you can get. I would say, listener, just start to say out loud how you appreciate people. It's
And
gonna be an
notice the
automatic connection.
discomfort that you may feel and acknowledge and sit in it, but it is going to be an automatic connection. And it's that piece of how many times I just said to a coworker yesterday who we just see each other like passing in the hall. And I went up to her and put my arm around her and I'm like, how are you? Like, really, how are you doing?
Yeah.
And not good or bad. Like, how are you really doing?
Mm.
And that can create a wonderful moment of connection.
Connection it is. That brings us to the end of our show, everyone. Thank you for listening this morning, and be sure to join us next week as we explore the intensity of emotions while we live and share mental health together. Most importantly, be kind to yourself. Remember that connection fosters wellness, and your voice is one the world needs to hear. Share yourselves, friends.